Hello, so welcome to part 2 of Admirals, Engineers, Historians, post-1850 edition. Please note I'm doing the post-1850 edition because, well, I started off trying to do both the post and the pre-1850 edition and actually wasted most of my time. I wasn't writing a book on Saturday and a good part of Sunday trying to put it together and get it to work, and it just was... it was colossal. I mean, seriously. And it's... the shipwrights of the pre-1850s are even more impossible to track down. And they shouldn't be, because there are some absolutely brilliant ones. But I'm going to have to go back to it, but it's going to have to be a time when I can get into actual archives. Because this is the trouble. I am limited to the books I have around me and the internet. So, at the moment, for research. Although that does provide some pretty cool things, as I showed the other day. The Canadian Military History Journal is absolutely amazing and has some great stuff in it, and you can always go through the London Gazette for the various VC write-ups, all sorts of things. So, today, Admiral, Engineers and Historians. Let's see. Part 2. Hello. So, right. You won't notice, but someone decided to call up just now and interrupt the video stream, and that's so annoying when you're just getting in your flow. Right then, so back, and hopefully you can see it, because I can see it on the screen. So the Admirals are Burrough, Hornby, Vian, Tyrwhitt, Naval and Henderson. The Historians and Engineers are Norman Freeman, James Cable, and Stanley Goodall. Now, believe it or not, someone shot me the other day, and actually it was yesterday or this morning, because they told me I hadn't talked about Stanley Goodall enough. And I thought I mentioned him quite a lot, because you have the Third Sea Lord and you have the Director of Naval Construction. And they work together to produce ships. One is providing the concept, one is providing the political coverage and the reason for building. One is actually designing the technical detail and turning this one's vision into reality. So you need both. They're sort of a symbiotic partnership. It's rather like the amphibious warfare command structure I talked about in the Falklands War stuff. So, it's fun. Right. Next slide. We have Geoffrey Hornby. Apparently is first. What are we going to it? Oh well. Anyway, so Geoffrey Hornby is one of those admirals who is sort of never spoken about enough, because he doesn't get to fight a big war. But he does all sorts of things. We were talking about the Pig War recently on some of the videos, and he is the commander of the Naval Brigade in it, and he basically feeds the Americans into agreeing with whatever with him and getting in and making it peaceful. But he is a great student of naval history, of military history. He is one of those professionals, and he's professionals in a time of peace. And we spend a lot of time teaching military officers and naval officers about times of war and how to prepare and lead in war. I often wonder if we spend enough time preparing them how to lead in peace and how to do their job in peacetime. If you're interested, Geoffrey Hornby is a guy to look up. An admiral definitely to consider. Harab. He should be better known than he is. Sorry. You know, he does all sorts of interesting things in World War II, but he is this quiet, professional, competent, calm, knows what he's doing. He's just forgotten, and he shouldn't be. Plus, he just looks like the guy who down the pub would actually have interesting conversation, not just the one who'd be being loud. Speaking as the sober person, usually down the pub drinking iron brew, you do learn the difference in the personalities. Phillip Viens. Phillip Viens. So Phillip Viens' action this day is a must-read by anyone. And no, I do not have shares in this book, and I'm not sure if I doubt it's even still in print, but you can probably find old copies. This is a guy who goes from being captain of a flotilla, a torpedo, a destroyer flotilla. Maybe I try one destroyer flotilla. To being a vice admiral by the end of World War II. He serves as the 5th Sea Lord in charge of naval aviation in after World War II. He does so many things. And his book is just littered with cool pictures. He even has a picture of the memorial erected in Yossingford to the Altmark incident, which he's incredibly proud of. You know, about the British pirates. He is just so proud of that. You know, it's just littered with stuff which is so worthwhile looking at and going through. And you're not, until you read about Operation Vigorous, it's both going to make you laugh and it's going to make you very, very interested with Operation Vigorous. But the name is very funny, but the actual story is quite serious, you know. But it's just like that, and it is an excellent book. If you can get a copy of Phillip Viens' Action this Day, it's worthwhile. Reginald Tyrwhitt. I knew he was in here somewhere. He's just a cool guy. And it's his Harwich force, which he moulds very much in his body. And then later the China station, which again he moulds and develops, which is so much a key of the Royal Navy post-World War One. You know, we talk about Jutland, we talk about the impact of that on the Royal Navy and shaping the Royal Navy. No. We should be looking at the Harwich Force more. We should be looking at this man more, because the stuff he does goes into the Royal Navy's very fabric and soul in World War II. He's the hero, really, they have within them that they can all look up to. He's got a nice balance of both Jellicoe and Beatty. Admirals of Percy Noble. What more can I say? Percy Noble's stuff is in the archives at Churchill College Archives, and that is a well worth trip. But, you know, he is a master of consensus leadership. He doesn't come across as aggressive enough for some, which is why he's pushed out in favour of Max Horton for the Western Approaches Command. But his time in command of Western Approaches is incredibly critical because he uses the experience he had of being 4th Sea Lord, which is the one in charge of logistics, alongside Henderson in 1935 to 38. So he's 4th Sea Lord when Henderson's 3rd Sea Lord, to really build up the processes and the equipment and the systems which are needed. They worked quite closely during that 35-38 period. He really did it a lot to make the Western Approaches what it was, and then Max Horton gets to come in and basically go, yeah, no, I can use this aggressively and do this, and do all this. And Max Horton, of course, is good at doing that. He's a former submariner. He really is good at it. But he's standing on the shoulder of a giant to do it. And succeeds Cunningham then as the head of the British delegation in Washington in 1942. But I would say my favorite period for him is the fact he is the CNC China Station, 1938 to January 1941. And he managed to handle the Japanese and the Pacific exceptionally well in that period. So well that any successor really doesn't look as good, but he's done so well in that period in managing that threat and managing to keep it with the resources and the dwindling resources he had. He's managed to keep the Japanese still not sure about the British position. They only become really confident about the British position post the time he leaves, because they're not. He keeps them off balance basically with some careful diplomacy and careful appearances. You know, hello, I'm here. What the British are there? Where did he come from? He's a master of the. Oh, we're just popping around for tea. What the frick? There's a British cruiser there. How did that happen? Where did it come from? It's a brilliant way of, in the nicest way, if you can balance the right level of force for using it, of keeping your enemy off kilter. If you use the wrong size force doing it, you scare the life out of them and start a war. But if you use the right size force and get it right timing wise, you just keep them just that bit worried. Reginald Henderson. Okay, this is why I rushed through the others, because apparently I've only got about 30 minutes left recording on my my lovely storage system, and you know, hey ho. So, for starters, you'll have noticed that I have included a Wikipedia page here. Why would an academic include a Wikipedia page? Well, for starters, a Wikipedia sometimes is quite good as a source of sources, which I teach my students to use. Secondly, this Wikipedia page has been upgraded by people who listen and have been listening to my videos, and I wanted to say thank you for that, and thank you for the work you've put in this page. It's immeasurably better than what used to be available about him. And I wanted to say thank you to you all. And I wanted to answer the question some people said, which is why hadn't I done the Wikipedia page? Okay, I didn't do anything on the Wikipedia page because I have met so many good historians who have started out by editing Wikipedia pages, by adding to it. That's their starting point of their lives in terms of moving on to actually going on to become semi-professional or amateur or even professional historians and all those sort of things, or just letting their passion out and managing to do their own websites and these sort of things. Start off with Wikipedia. I don't like it, therefore, when people like me who are professional historians who who are publishing books and all these things, that's our opportunity. We have those advantages. We have websites which will quite happily take our work. I don't like it. I understand people do it. I'm not going to tell them off for it, but I don't like it myself, so I wouldn't do it myself. I wouldn't want to step on what can be a great starting point for other historians. And that's what I see Wikipedia as often. I see it as a great starting point for other historians. The reason I tell my students not to use it as a reference source is because you never know who's editing it and what their particular bias or interest is, and how well they know their subject and all these things. But if you go and look at the sources they've used, you get a good example of how well they've done. And this is such a well-sourced out Wikipedia page. This is a really, really high-class sourced Wikipedia page. And I think I'm probably the least credible source on there. So this is really, really good. And I do apologize for letting the side down. But, you know, it is absolutely excellent. I will put more references in my videos to improve the quality for that page. It's really, really good. Now, my picture, of course, of him, I'm taking from the transaction of Naval Architects, 1939. And I put there, strengths, good at politics, excellent organisation with a fine understanding of strategy and technology. Weakness, died too soon, set the ball rolling on many things thanks to 6 years as Third Sea Lord, but didn't get to see it through. Known for being Third Sea Lord for the Tribal class destroyers, HMS Unicorn, the armoured deck carriers, and building the Royal Navy, which fought World War II. And he did. He did all those. But again, as I've used before, and as I have a feeling, words which were probably written by Sir Stanley Goodall, or at least heavily involved by Sir Stanley Goodall, who's one of the senior people at the Institution of Naval Architects at this time, and is more than capable of influencing these things. I will leave it with his words. Henderson was a born leader of men, owing nothing to tradition or rank for his ascendancy over them. It was a matter of personality with him. He was never bound by routine or convention if he saw advantage to the service in departure from them. He had an original mind, great ability and quickness of grasp, but was impatient of any suggestion of formalism or red tape. So his methods were often unorthodox, but they were always justified themselves. He married in 1911 Islay, daughter of Mr. R.M. Campbell, and had 2 sons. He made CB in 19 and promoted to GCB in 1936. So that was 3 years into his tenure as Third Sea Lord. Reginald Guy Hannon was the son of Commander John Henderson, RN, one of 4 brothers, the other 3 of whom became admirals. Born in September, so he's got 3 admirals as uncles. Born in September 1881, he entered the Navy in 1895. His first ship as a midshipman was the Mars, a battleship commanded by his uncle, Captain Reginald Henderson, who I think he probably was named for. Later, he served in the China and North America squadrons as well as at home. He passed all examinations with flying colours, qualifying as a gunnery officer and was promoted to commander in 1913. In that rank, he served in Admiral Mark Kerr's naval mission to Greece, from which he was on leave in England on the outbreak of war in 1914. He was a once appointed executive officer of the battleship Erin, built for Turkey but taken over for the Royal Navy on the outbreak of war in the Grand Fleet. And it was an absolute annoying thing to try and get to work. The executive officer really had to do a lot, and they had to pick out a very good one for that, because the captain was going to be concentrating on fighting the ship. The executive officer was going to be concentrating on keeping the ship working and keeping it with the rest of the Royal Navy fleet. And Erin was very much an individual ship in the Royal Navy force with some of its design things. So he had a lot of work and a lot of technical work to make it fit with what the Royal Navy wanted it to do and get it to work with all the things that they had. Then he remained until 1917, when he was one of the band of young officers, especially chosen for their ability, initiative and energy, taken with him from the fleets to the Admiralty by Sir John Jellicoe on assuming as First Sea Lord. Remember what I said in an earlier video about how Jellicoe picks his staff officers? Well, there you go. You have it defined in one sentence. One of the band of young officers, especially chosen for their ability, initiative and energy. At the Admiralty, Henderson was largely instrumental in convincing his seniors of the practicality of a system of convoy and in getting it adopted. For that service, he was specially promoted to captain on October the 18th, 1917. He remained at the Admiralty for work in connection with the administration of the convoy system until the end of the war. Then he goes on after the war to become Chief of Staff at the China Station. It would have been completely unsurprising in many ways for him to have possibly gone out to the China Station and relieve Noble if he'd stayed in. Though honestly in 1939, 1940 he does need to move on, but he could have gone and relieved Noble earlier on the China Station. That would have been suitable with his rank. Him and Noble went up together quite a lot. Noble was slightly older, but no. Henderson is an amazing admiral to look at. As I said, I am probably his biggest prophet, so I have to be kind of careful in a way, sound like it. He does have weaknesses. Not just dying too soon, he sometimes grows impatient, especially with other naval officers who aren't following his logic. It's one of those things. He is very good with junior officers at explaining them, very kindly on that one, and very good with civilians explaining them. With senior naval officers, he expects them to understand what the business of fighting a war and fighting peace is. And if they don't, he finds it incredibly annoying. And you can understand that, because he expects a certain standard and level of professionalism. But also, the problem is not everyone is going to be as smart as you are in life. And, you know, and not everyone's going to have the same knowledge and experience that you have. So it's iffy. He's quite good at handling it, but occasionally there is conversations between him when he's Third Sea Lord and the CNC Mediterranean at the time, which does not go well for the CNC Mediterranean, who gets verbally beaten up at several thousand miles, a couple of thousand miles. It works though. Next slide. Norman Freeman. So, I haven't got a picture of Norman Freeman. Well, I have got a picture of Norman Freeman, but it's a personal picture of him and me from a conference when we did a selfie together, and I don't have permission to use that, so I'm not using that. I'm using the picture of the books. Norman Freeman is one of those authors, yes, it's very easy to criticize him. He has done so many books. Some sources say 30, others say 40, 50. My own mental calculation is he's been involved in at least 60 to 70 books. As either editing, helping, assisting, or writing them entirely himself. I have got a whole host of them, and I know I've got more than are on this list. I've got a whole collection behind me for starters. He has a habit of when other historians die before they can finish off their works, if they've been his friends, he will pick them up and he will finish that work and give all the credit to them, but you'll just see a small thing edited by Norman Freeman. He's a really super guy in that way, and he's really nice. I do know how fast he works, though. To produce all those books, you have to work in time. He does incredibly fast. And that means in past, I have had issues with some of his references in terms of, I'm not quite sure if those that was the archive source he meant me to be looking at when he said that. And that's me being honest. Very few, far and in between, and he is overall a very good historian to read to get an idea of what goes on in the world and what the history has been. My favourite book of all his that he's done is probably the US Maritime Strategy one. Although I do have the British Carrier Aviation was the first one of his big books I got. Currently looking around me for it. There it is. That was the first one of the big Freeman books I ever bought. Believe it or not, it cost me £200 when I bought it. And then they brought out a new edition next year and they immediately went down to 60 quid. I hated the world at that point. Nah, I'm really glad I have that edition. It's a far prettier cover, I think, than the current ones. Anyway, that's my personal choice. Next slide. Sir James Cable. Okay. Sir James Cable joined the British Army in World War II, retired as a major in 1953, and I could go through reading all that. He started out as an army officer, becomes an ambassador, and is now one of the greatest naval theorists we have. His book I have here, Gunboat Diplomacy. I also have Britain's Naval Future, and I have about another 4 others up there. So I pretty much have all 6 which are listed here, and I think he produced more than that myself, but I'm not sure. You see, he starts off writing under a pseudonym because he's in the Foreign Commonwealth Office. So he doesn't really want people to know what he's writing and criticizing them. He used the name of Grant Hugo. As it was in the 1960s, I don't think it has anything to do with Hugh Grant. But you know, maybe Hugh Grant was inspired by it. But this gunboat diplomacy, especially for what we've got going on in the South China Sea and what we've got going around the world at the moment, where we are entering an age which is far more like the 1920s and 1930s in terms of its differences in powers and the various way people are conducting themselves versus what the 1990s and early 2000s were like at sea, when it was far, in a most way, it wasn't as obvious what was going on. It wasn't done as blatantly. Means that this should be on every single naval officer's and every single diplomat's bookshelves, in my opinion, because this is the best work that's been produced on it. Other people more recently will claim theirs is better, and I'm sure they have good things. But all the ones I've read recently have been overly obsessed with buzzwords, not really that good on the practicalities. They have been good in ways, and each one, I'm not putting them all down. They all have good things in them, and I've read quite a few of them, and I've been very impressed by the author's thoughts. But the best one by far is still the original in my mind, which is James Cable's Gunboat Diplomacy. And I always like it that he starts off with the definitions, the quote he has at the beginning of chapter 1. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said, in rather a scornful tone, it means just what I chose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master. That's all. That's, of course, Lewis Carroll from Alice Through the Looking Glass. Alice mentions in Wonderland, isn't it, actually? I think. Yeah. Any man, well, I was speaking as someone who got Terry Pratchett quotes into his PhD thesis, anyone who can get the perfect quotes from fiction and use them to write a really serious, really hard-hitting, really good and well thought out book on naval diplomacy and how to conduct it in a frictious environment, there's got to be someone worth reading. So, James Cable. Next slide. Stanley Goodall. This is a paragraph from my book, okay? This is what I did, because I already have an entire section about him written up in my book, about 3 pages of A4 long currently as it stands in one of the chapters. Chapter 5. He is, as I said, the yin to Henderson's yang when it comes to ship construction. So everything that Henderson pushes through, this is the one who takes Henderson's ideas, so Henderson going, I want to do this and this and this, and has to try and turn it into reality and has to produce all those designs, and Henderson then draws over them and sends them back to him, and he has to turn it into reality. This man is equally as important. And then you have World War II, after Henderson's died, he carries on, and he's in post from 1936 to 1952. 1936 to 1952. For 16 years, he runs one of the largest navies in the world, going through a world war in the middle of that, preparing for a world war and transitioning out after World War War's construction and design departments, is in charge of every single design. Not a single boat, not a single sloop, not a single anything leaves those works, leaves them without him having looked over their designs and checked them. He takes it incredibly seriously. It's calculated that during World War II, he looked at somewhere in the region of 700 to 800 different ship designs, okay? And then this ship designs will be groups of designs. So that's the 700 to 800 different ships. Some of those designs are built, some of those designs weren't. Some of them will be 5 or 6 drafts of designs will come through. So there are thousands of designs he's had to pore over. Tens of thousands, probably. And the fact is, thanks to those transactions books, the Institution of Naval Architects transactions, there are so many quotes because he was such an active person in it. He really believed in training younger naval architects and in helping them go forward. And, you know, this actually is the whole section from my book. As you can see, I said 3 pages of A4. And he's so useful as deputy director of naval construction. This is his response in 1936 to Rear Admiral Firstfield's paper on modern trends in warship design, and the discussion it created in the Institute of Naval Architects afterwards merited a rather large speech from him. Henderson did sometimes go along to these, as I think I've said before, but Stanley Goodall really did go along to them. I listened to Lord Cork's remarks on the carrying of aircraft in men of war with considerable dismay. Admiral Firstfield dismissed this question rather lightly by comparing the carrying of aircraft with the carrying of boats. But the two problems are not at all comparable. Admiral Firstfield stated that space and weight are required for the catapult from which aircraft are flown off. Lord Cork spoke of the difficulty of getting the aircraft back into the ship, but neither mentioned the subject of gun blast. Aircraft are large and fragile, and the greater part of the deck area of a capital ship is swept by gun blast. Hence, to provide such accommodation for the aircraft that after action they be available for use in the air is a problem that is extremely difficult. But apart from this fact, I feel that naval officers do not comprehend sufficiently clearly the effect on displacement of those weapons which had not been limited by treaty, as the gun had been limited. I refer to the mine, the torpedo, and the bomb, protection against which affects the size of the capital ship. There have been great technical advances since 1921. I would like to refer particularly to the advances in marine engineering, which would have enabled some reduction to be made in the displacement limit of capital ships, if at the same time a limit had been placed on the size of the torpedo, the mine, and the bomb. Until such a limit is imposed, I fail to see any hope for a reduction in the displacement of the capital ship. That was him being almost polite. No. Stanley Goodall is important because we don't talk about engineers enough, and this is one of the quiet men of history. He turns down awards at some points because he doesn't feel they're prestigious enough for the amount of work he's doing, but he's that's publicly said, but also what he's also saying is, in the nicest way, if you're giving me this award and you're demoting my award to this level, you're not going to reward my people. He turns down rewards because if he's not going to take a reward if his people can't get the reward, and he knows how hard they're working. Eventually he is persuaded to take an award when enough awards are given to the people who are working for him. He's a good guy. So, the question is, as it is now 9:30 whether I will get part 3 recorded tonight. Possibly. Hopefully. It is my intention. But if not, I will get it recorded at some point, probably tomorrow, and have it uploaded at some point tomorrow. So all 3 parts will be uploaded. But if you want to see, it is going to cover Fraser, Cunningham, Ramsey, Tovey, Clapp, Keyes, Horton, Corbett, Richmond, Nathan Barnaby, and Mahan. Yes, I'm going into the Corbett, Mahan, and Richmond debate. Lord help me. But it does mean I get to jump, and I did have this structure. So I had Henderson and Goodall in part 2, and then I have Bruce Fraser starting off part 3. And of course, Bruce Fraser was the guy who took over after Henderson. Hope you've enjoyed part 2. And I said, I hope to record it tonight. Thank you. I hope to record part 3 tonight, so you will have all 3 parts tomorrow. Thank you, and chat. Well, when this comes out, it'll be chat later today. So, see you this afternoon.